So let's get started with the basics. Maureen, what is dementia versus Alzheimer's disease? I think we throw around these topics like they're the same thing.
Exactly. Well, first of all, Beth, thank you for having me here and to be able to present some knowledge to you all about dementia. First of all, I want you to think of dementia as a general term. It is not a disease, but we throw it around like, oh, she has dementia, he has dementia. Dementia is a general term, meaning that there is memory loss and changes in thinking, in judgment, in reasoning, significant enough to impact independent function. So I want you to remember that. We'll come back to that. But it's significant enough to impact independent function. So think of a big golf umbrella that you open up on the golf course. That big umbrella is dementia. But there are causes for dementia. And that's where the diseases come into play. So the most common form or the most common cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. So we will talk about the various causes of that umbrella term, dementia. But in the public, we do go back and forth with dementia, Alzheimer's, dementia. And that's okay, but I want you to understand the difference between the two.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
We're already starting with some revelations, I can tell. This is great. So, under that umbrella, then, are there different types of dementia, and what would be some of the most common ones?
Sure. So there are many different types of dementia, but there are very common ones that we see, and I see in my practice every day. The most common is Alzheimer's disease. 60 to 80% of people that have dementia, it's caused from Alzheimer's disease. How do we know? It affects short-term memory. If we were to look at an MRI of the brain and drill right through, which we don't do, drill right through to the brain, there's a small part in the brain called our hippocampus, and that stores our short-term memory. When we look at that and measure it, the hippocampus is small. It's smaller than it should be, and that is kind of the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Also, when we do a scan of the brain, we see amyloid, plaque, and tangles in the brain. There's amyloid and tau. Those are two not so good proteins that we see in the brain. So that's Alzheimer's disease. The second most common is vascular dementia. Vascular dementia are those people that might have had a stroke, some sort of clot in the brain. Maybe they have narrowing of the blood vessels in the brain, or there's some sort of blockage that causes these changes. That's the second most common. The third most common is Lewy body dementia. Has anyone heard of that one?
Yes.
Yeah. So Lewy body dementia looks a lot like Parkinson's disease. The difference is that Lewy body dementia comes with memory loss, where Parkinson's disease has more of the movement disorders, but at the end of the disease, they develop the dementia. So it's really a timing. But the Lewy bodies are actually these proteins that we can see up in the brain, and that's what determines that type. Another very common one is called frontotemporal dementia. It affects that front part of your brain, and that is, and it preserves our memory. So you don't see memory loss in frontotemporal dementia, but what you see is emotional problems, irritability, lashing out, maybe a personality change, maybe being very inappropriate in public. It affects that emotional center, but it preserves memory generally. And then the last one I want to talk about is mixed dementia. Mixed dementia is a combination of one or the other. I would say the majority of all the patients I see have mixed dementia. Does that mean it's worse? No. It means that they might have memory loss that's greater than expected for their age, causing Alzheimer's disease, And then when we look at the brain, we see that they also have narrowing of the blood vessels. So now they have vascular. So it's mixed because there's Alzheimer's with vascular. So most common, again, is Alzheimer's, but mixed dementia is very common because it's generally two dementias in one.
Awesome. Thank you. So, given those different types of dementia, what does normal aging look like versus dementia?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get that question all the time, like, do I have dementia? Do I have Alzheimer's disease? What do I have? So I want you to know, and this is another big thing to take with you out of the room today, normal aging does not mean you are going to get dementia. Just because you are getting older doesn't mean you're going to get dementia. However, when we get older, as we become older, our brain shrinks. Unfortunately, but it does shrink. And our memory loss, there is normal memory loss. And our processing speed is slower, right? So if I see you on the street, I should know your name. I really should, but I don't know it. Not until maybe a couple hours later. Oh yes, that was Susan, right? That is normal aging. So I want to just go over some common normal aging versus not normal aging. So again, not able to know the name of someone immediately that you should know, but it comes to you. I always say it's going in the file cabinet of your brain. It takes time. That's normal aging. What's not normal aging is you don't ever remember meeting that person, ever. Or how about that person that you should know and you really don't know them anymore? That is a concern. Also, forgetting things occasionally. How many have you forgot your keys? Your wallet? Yeah, pocketbook? Yeah. That occasional forgetting where you place something or forgetting to take it into the car with you, normal aging. When it's not normal aging, when it happens frequently. All the time you're losing your keys. All the time you can't remember where your wallet is. That's not normal aging. Normal aging, you occasionally cannot think of a word, like, I need to go to, and it just doesn't come. That's normal aging. But what happens with a dementia is that we have a lapse. There's like a silence almost, where we can't even come up with the full sentence. That's not normal aging. Another is you are really worried about your memory and thinking. You yourself are. That's usually normal aging. That's normal aging. It's when you think there's nothing wrong, but your loved ones, your spouse, your adult children, they say, I'm really worried about you, Mom. If that happens, that's a red flag versus I'm just really worried, I'm scared I'm going to get Alzheimer's disease. Another one is bill paying. You can miss a bill, maybe paid it twice. How many have done that? Or kept that bill in your pocketbook. That's normal. But what we see are people that have dementia cannot function. They cannot process how to pay the bills and do the bills, and they need someone to take over that responsibility. Okay.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I remember hearing Hugh Downs on 20 years ago saying it's not when you forget where your car keys are, it's when you forget what they're for.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So.
I want to add a little bit
Yes.
to that. So from our experience of working with families and seniors, we encounter different levels of
Yes.
mild memory loss to potential dementias, right? So one thing we like to encourage is getting tested, right? So it's important to get proper testing, maybe even a diagnosis if needed.
Okay.
That's just really going to help the individual understand what's going on. So that's something that we usually encourage as well.
I love that, and that leads us into our next question. We wanted to talk about diagnosing dementia and what's involved with that, so thank you.
Yes, so when someone comes to us at my memory clinic and they're worried about their loved one or they come by themselves, we have what's like a puzzle that we have to put together. There is not a blood test that we can do at this moment in time to say you have Alzheimer's disease. So we have all these pieces of the puzzle. One being, we take a very thorough history. We listen to you. We say, when did you start noticing changes? And give me examples of those changes. We listen to you, and we also listen to your loved one, because your loved one sees things a lot different than you do at times. So we need that perspective too. So we call that the informant. We also do a picture of the brain. Remember, I told you we want to look at that hippocampus, we want to look at the blood vessels. So we do order an MRI of the brain. We also do lab work. We have a panel of lab work that we do to see if there's anything reversible in the blood that is causing some of this memory loss. Sometimes that can be. I had a patient that came to me and she was very, her short-term memory was very poor. And when we did our puzzle pieces and we did her blood work, she had minuscule amounts of vitamin B12. And once we gave her B12, she was as good as new. So B12 is one of those things that we check all the time to make sure you have enough of, to see if that's contributing to it. We also look at your risk factors. We know certain risk factors put you at higher risk. We also look at your medication profile. We know certain meds affect memory, such as sleeping pills, tranquilizers, over-the-counter Benadryl, NyQuil, Ambien. The list goes on and on and on. So we look at those to see if you have a high-risk medication. Then we do a physical exam, and then we also ask you about your mood. Do you know why we ask about your mood? Because with dementia, dementia just doesn't affect memory or thinking. It generally affects mood. So we will ask you about depression and anxiety. Sometimes depression can be our first sign of dementia. Sometimes people will have depression that looks like dementia, and then when we fix the depression, their memory improves. So those are all parts of our puzzle, in addition to asking what a person can and can't do as far as daily care of their general basic needs, to things such as paying bills, driving, cooking, shopping, all of those things. And we find out what they can and can't do, because remember, it's independent function, and I want to see if you're able to do those things. So I can put that whole assessment together.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love the looking at the whole picture. I think that's great. So the title of our seminar today was Dementia, is it avoidable and is it reversible? And I think we'd like to look at that. I know that many of us have an annual colonoscopy, some of us in the room have a mammogram. There are some regular tests that we're used to. Are there things that we should be doing for our brain health as well?
Right, so I want you to think of normal aging and dementia. And right in the middle there is a gray area called mild cognitive impairment. Mild cognitive impairment is leading its way up to dementia. 40 to 50% of people with mild cognitive impairment develop dementia. So we want to stop it. We want to stop it here at normal aging, even before it gets to mild cognitive impairment. So what we want is, we really need these baseline assessments, just like your colonoscopy or your mammogram. We would look at your risk factors. We will look at your meds, like I said. We will do a cognitive test. You will have a full report, so we know, let's get this right now. Let's try to knock this off, because Alzheimer's disease is a very big problem. And why it is because we're not looking at prevention the way we should. If we turn the wheel, if you will, and look more at prevention than late stage treatment, we will be so much better off with this disease.
So in a one-word answer, should everyone in the room have a baseline?
I think everyone should. If I could put a banner across the sky, I think everyone should have a baseline assessment, so you know where you are, what your risk factors are, and what can you do to mitigate those risk factors. And we have that knowledge. We have that through research and science, what we know works.
Awesome, awesome. So, as we kind of transition our discussion from the scientific part, the medical part of dementia and Alzheimer's, it affects not only the person, it affects the caregiver as well. And let's have a little bit of discussion, and both of you can weigh in on this, the impact on the caregiver, the use of professional caregivers. How does that work for a person or a family living with dementia in their house?
Right, so if you do unfortunately have someone that has a dementia, it has to be a team approach. It has to be. I was a caregiver once for my mother, and I didn't have that team that I know is so imperative for good care. We have to. If they were in a facility, they would have a physician or a nurse practitioner, nurse, nutritionist, activities director, housekeeper, all of that. If somebody's at home, it's just you. So you have to have that care, and that's why we have our partners here today. Burnout is huge. I have lost caregivers before my patients have passed because of the stress of caregiving. So if someone comes to see me, we care for not just the patient, but the caregiver, because it's that important. So do you want to?
No, I agree. One of the things that we see again is the caregiver burnout factor with the clients that we work with, meaning that they're pending a transition into a memory care, and by the time we get involved, the damage has been done. I hate to say it that way, but it has been. So I would just implore folks to look at resources. There's really so many resources out there to support the caregiver. They're not doing this alone. They don't have to do it alone, I should say. So look at resources. Doing things like you're doing today potentially is imperative. I applaud you for that. And even if it's not for you, your neighbor, friend, let them know, listen, there's help out there. You don't have to do this alone as a caregiver, because the impact to the caregiver is significant. So,
yeah, I agree. Thank you so much. So let's say we have a diagnosis. We've gone through the myriad of tests and we have an actual diagnosis. How important is it to have a systematic approach to treatment, or do you just throw up your hands and say this is the way it's going to be?
Yeah, I think the thing that bothers me the most is when someone says, oh, my loved one has Alzheimer's disease, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. That's probably a very big pet peeve of mine. There is a ton we can do. No, it is not curable. It is a slow, progressive disease. But there are things that we can do systematically throughout that journey. And that journey is very uncertain. Every single patient we see has a different presentation, if you will. Everyone is different. So whatever it may be, and we are specialists, so we look at the whole person. Mind, body, spirit, we put it all together. We don't want that fragmented care where someone goes to the neurologist, someone goes to the psychiatrist, someone goes here or there. So I think the importance is knowing that you need specialized care for this, and there is a lot that can be done to help you through that uncertain journey.
Yeah, I think we are really blessed here in the Orlando area, especially to have a lot of resources, a lot of very skilled resources, and thank you for kind of shedding some light on this hard topic to get our heads around. Ignacio, I'd like to kind of switch over to you, and if you can, Ignacio's background is helping caregivers and families deal with this disease and the decisions that they need to make. So there's a lot of talk of memory care communities, and you even referenced that, Maureen, that in a community certain things happen. What's the benefit of a memory care community for someone, even if their diagnosis is early?
So first, before I address that question, the typical thing that we get is when is the right time potentially. One thing, because the benefits are great, and I will discuss those. It is a subjective answer in terms of when my loved one can benefit from memory care. One thing I will say is that there is a window of opportunity, meaning from a criteria perspective, to actually transition into one of these communities. Okay, so that's going to be the number one thing. And we realize that this is not an easy decision. Okay, it is an emotional decision most of the time. But again, it is important to address the situation and potentially make a transition if it makes sense, right? Everybody's a little different. So the benefit of a memory care community to the individual going through the dementia journey per se is going to be that dedicated focus and attention and care. Okay. Now, can you get that at home? Potentially, yes. But again, you're getting that dedicated focus. These communities are a little bit wide-ranging in terms of what they have to offer. You have communities that are standalone memory care communities, meaning that's all they do. You have communities that offer the full spectrum. They offer independent living, assisted living, and then memory care as a progression as you change in place, right? There's even residential homes that offer memory care. So what that means is it's like a private home that's been converted and licensed to provide care in Florida. And they're a little bit more quaint, small. So for some folks that works out great too. So the benefit is going to be that dedicated focus and attention, and then the benefit to the loved one or the caregiver is going to be that they can now go back to being the husband or wife, or the son or daughter, right? Not the caregiver. Because again, we see that a lot as well. And that emotional toll, which can be very frustrating to the individual, is a lot of guilt, sometimes a lot of anger, okay? Because it's not easy, right? So that's the benefit to the individual that's unfortunately had to make a tough decision, is that they can go back to being the loved one.
That's awesome. I think that expression, it takes a village, and leverage is so important in so many areas of our life. And I think that's really what you're speaking to. I could not put this seminar series on without the 4 other people that are here, helping to set up and run the program. If I tried to do that all myself, I'd be exhausted and I wouldn't be any good at asking questions. I probably couldn't even read the questions off the paper. So I love that there's a leverage component, and it's an emotional decision, but sometimes we have to look at it objectively, right, and all of that. So how does somebody know when the home is no longer the best place for someone living with dementia to stay in, and when should you start looking at the different communities and the different options?
So the biggest, I always say, look at 2 things.
Okay.
Safety and resources.
Okay.
Okay, if you're looking at the home, and if you're contemplating a home no longer being the right option, what I mean by safety is just that. Is your loved one safe? Is there a lot of fallings occurring? Are they getting the proper care at home? And that could be through home health, private duty services, things like that. But if things are progressing so much so that safety is now a significant concern, then that's going to be important to recognize, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Resources is going to be the other thing. What I mean by resources are going to be, of course, third-party providers that can come in and help, maybe some things you can pay for to come in and help. That can add up over time to be a significant cost. Sure. Not everybody can do that, so that's going to be the other thing to consider, is going to be the financial resources. Me personally, and I said this to my wife too, is if I can stay home as long as I can, please, let's do that, right?
Right.
But again, we know that sometimes for some folks, that's just not the realistic option. Okay?
So, when should you begin even just seeing what's out there? Like,
so we like to encourage folks to be proactive in this process. And what I mean by that is, again, I would say about 80 to 90% of our clients are making a decision because of a traumatic situation. What that means is that now you have to go through this process and journey with high sense of emotion, okay? It can be done that way, but if you can be proactive, if you have even the potential idea that this may be happening, be proactive in finding out resources, how is it paid for, average cost, what level of care is your loved one going to need. All that's going to do is just provide information that you know, So when the time comes, you can make a more sound decision, right? Versus that emotional decision that is uneasy.
So at the very least, it sounds like you at least need to know who to reach out to.
Yes.
And so we're glad to be able to provide some of those resources here through this educational series, both with our educational partners and our panelists. So thank you. Once it's been decided that this is the track we need to take, that we need to look at a community, how does a family go about finding the right community?
It can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you're trying to do it alone, okay? There's over 200, 300 licensed assisted living memory care communities in Central Florida, so there's a lot of options. You want to be able, through your search process, to match the community to your loved one's needs. And we'll talk about this a little bit further, but there's different license types as well in terms of what they can offer from a clinical perspective, care perspective to the individual. Cost is going to be the biggest issue. That's what we encounter in terms of cost today and potentially in the future with inflation. And then most of these communities, if not all, will assess a year-over-year increase. So if you're going in a maxed budget situation, you may be in a tough situation down the road. So you want to factor in various things that you may know about and some that you may not even know about, and that's where working with an individual that knows kind of what to look for, what to ask is going to be imperative.
Comment. I have a patient like right now who is deciding, do I keep my wife at home or do I place them? She's becoming too much care for him to do alone. So what he has chosen to do, and he's a planner, is he's doing respite. And respite is where he is going to a facility that he is considering placing his loved one in for a week. And he will place her for a week. He will take that much needed break and he will see if that's kind of a good fit. It's kind of like trying it out. And I thought that was a brilliant idea, and I have used that strategy for many of my people. So try respite before maybe making that final decision.
And do many of the communities offer that, Ignacio?
The majority do.
Okay.
They may have different availability in terms of being able to accept
Sure.
respite, right? But yes, most of them will do the respite. In terms of requirements for respite, it's slightly different than becoming a permanent resident, but it's definitely a solid option to explore if it works, if the community is something you want to potentially look at long-term. That's really good.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. And what do they tell us every time we get on an airplane? When those masks fall down, put your own mask on first before you help anyone else. And I think getting back to your point of having lost many caregivers,
Yes.
the need to have that time to take a breath, relax, regroup, and be ready to go back in and provide that health care. I think that's a great idea. So Ignacio, you touched on different types of licenses among these 300-some communities in the Orlando area. What does that look like?
So this is a little unique to Florida. Not every state has this. So in Florida,
We're special.
Yeah. So in Florida, there's technically 4 license types in senior living or assisted living memory care. The very basic license that's required just to operate and function is the standard license, okay? So that's just to open your doors and be licensed and credentialed to care for folks. A higher level license is going to be the limited nursing services license. What that means is that community can accept potentially a higher level of care from a clinical perspective because they may be working with either LPNs or RNs to staff and care for the residents, if you would. The next license is called extended congregate care. Basically everything the limited nursing license can do, biggest difference is PEG tubes, to be honest with you. If you know feeding tube, PEG tubes, in order to have one of those and be in senior living, you would have to be in an ECC, extended congregate care licensed community. And then the fourth one, there's not too many of these, is the limited mental health licensing. That's not Alzheimer's, that's not dementia, that's going to be more schizophrenia, bipolar, things like that. So one of the things that's imperative or to recognize and understand in your search process is going to be your loved one's clinical needs now and in the future, okay? Again, every community is gonna be licensed differently, staffed differently. So what that means is when you're working with your loved one to be placed in a memory care community, you wanna make sure that their needs are matched, short-term and long-term, because potentially what could happen is, prime example, let's say there's insulin involved and injections are needed, or there's a catheter, oxygen, things like that. That's more of a skilled scenario, so you would want to have at least limited nursing potentially, if not ECC, there's a feeding tube. If you don't know these things and you secure a community for your loved one and things change down the road, they will no longer be able to care for their needs, and you'll be issued a 45-day notice to seek a higher care. And that can be a little traumatic and costly.
Sure, sure. And so by getting the right diagnosis, then you should know what's coming down the pike
Yes.
so that you know what type of community that you need to be in potentially down the road.
And I think that knowledge is power. We have many patients come to us and they say, my doctor said I have dementia. And like I said, that's a universal term, but no one ever tells them what really they have. You know, what type of dementia. They just kind of skirt around it. So not all providers do that, but we tell you or your loved one what it is and what we see down the road.
So I think that's key, finding the right provider that's going to give you 100% of the information. When we're looking at communities, and Ignacio has a placement company, same thing. What should you be looking for? We know what to look for to get the diagnosis. What should you be looking for if you're enlisting the help of a placement company to help you find the right place?
So I would encourage, so that there's different forms. Let me back up. So what's happened the last couple of years, there's been more placement providers or companies that have come into the market. I always encourage to work with local boutique companies. Reason why is every market is a little dynamic. I like to discourage working with national individuals, because basically what you'll have is going to be somebody in California telling you how to find a place in Orlando for your loved one. Okay, it's a little disconnected.
So you want someone with boots on the ground locally that can help navigate.
I would highly encourage that. Look at credentials. So when you do select a company, look at a website. Look at the credentials of the individuals that are going to be guiding you through this process. That's imperative because, as I've said so far, it's a little bit of due diligence that has to be done. Okay, there needs to be an understanding of a baseline for your loved one. So you want to be guided with folks that have the right credentials. Okay, that's going to be pretty important. So I think those two things, working with a boutique company that really understands the local market and has the credentials to help you through this process.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Now, you touched on this a little bit earlier, Ignacio, and I think it's something that is always in the back of our minds, whether we're looking at, projecting finances or whatever. Paying for memory care can seem especially daunting. What are cost ranges? How do you pay for that?
So in senior living, if you're talking senior living, assisted living, memory care always has the potential to be the most expensive option. The reason why is because of the amount of care that's involved and the amount of focus that's involved. I will say that unlike assisted living, memory care traditionally, for the most part, is all-inclusive. So what I mean by that, in assisted living, typically you're paying for room and board, and then you're paying for care as an additional cost, traditional assisted living, okay? In memory care, what they've done, knowing that there's just a high level of care, it's going to be all-inclusive in care. So what that means is you're paying one flat rate, okay? The average cost has gone up, unfortunately, especially with
everything.
unfortunately. So I'll give you a bit of a background. COVID didn't help, to be honest with you, and I think that applies to everything in terms of inflation and everything else. But a lot of these communities have held increasing that annual rate that I mentioned earlier, especially during COVID. They held off on that. But now that we're finding in 2023, especially, just about all of them are reassessing or have executed a year-over-year increase, anywhere from 2, 8, 10% to the base rate. Okay. So the average cost for memory care is probably around $4,800 a month, okay? There are some affordable options, meaning they're a little bit less than that, but I'll be very honest, it is not that much less, okay? There's definitely an entry point. Now, this is, of course, if we're talking a licensed, secured memory care community, okay? Meaning that that's what they do.
Their specialty.
Their specialty, yeah. You want to make sure they're secure and they're licensed, for sure.
Okay.
And the cost can go all the way up to $7,000 plus. So not cheap, but there are some things that can potentially help pay for these communities. And they are.
We're waiting with bated breath. It's not buy a lotto ticket this week, is it?
Yeah. So private pay is going to be, for the most part, what obviously is accepted, okay? There's literally 3 things that'll help pay for senior living and memory care. Number 1 is going to be if the individual happens to have a long-term care insurance policy. Those are a little rare. Not everybody has invested in these, but if you do have one.
Long-term care insurance. We touched on that at last month's seminar with Sean and Dana.
Good. So if you happen to have one of these policies, that's great. You want to find out the specifics around the policy, what triggers the policy, which transition into memory care should definitely trigger the policy. It's wide-ranging in how they pay, so you want to find out the specifics. I've seen anywhere from $50 a day to $400 a day. So typically a long-term care insurance policy will either help pay for some of the cost, or if you have a really excellent policy, it can pay for the entire cost of memory care, okay? That's number 1. Number 2 is if the individual happened to be a veteran. The VA has what's called the pension aid and attendance pension benefit. It has to be applied for. It's not automatic. There's a very specific criteria that the VA has. They look at wartime, the years they served. They have to be active duty, not necessarily not boots on the ground. It's a very specific criteria on that end, and also on the financial side to qualify for the VA aid and attendance. It's a great benefit. It'll pay. I think they just increased the rates this year in the 2000s, and then also the spouse can potentially get some of those benefits as well.
Awesome.
But it takes time to get this going. My understanding is anywhere from 4 to 6 months on average to get the benefit and have it applied if you're accepted. Okay. The other good thing about that specific benefit is that they will retro pay whatever that amount is in a lump sum. That's going to be probably the only benefit that does that. So for example, if you're getting $2,000 a month, 4 months into memory care, you finally get accepted, they'll retro pay that in a lump sum. So some folks, knowing that that's going to be an option, may come out of savings, family may contribute to help cover the cost until the VA kicks in. The last thing that will help pay for memory care is going to be the Medicaid waiver program, long-term care waiver program. This is a specific state-funded program. It's a low-income program. Has a very specific, stringent financial criteria, and also they look at the healthcare needs of the individual. It can take a little while to get this on, okay, because they look at finances and they get very stringent. And they basically volunteer, they triage the individual's needs. So if somebody has a very high level need, they're going to be potentially on top of the list versus somebody that's not. You know, we've seen it anywhere from 4 to 6 months, a year plus on the wait list, so it really depends. So when we talk about being proactive through this process, getting information, this is one of the reasons why. You want to know what kind of benefits are out there that you can apply for potentially. It's just going to alleviate things when the time comes. You already have this information, right? One thing I'll say really quick about the Medicaid is that unfortunately the communities that accept that Medicaid are very limited. Not every community will accept the Medicaid waiver program. Okay, so important to know that. And we like to discuss that with our clients because if they have the funds for the next year or two to cover the cost for memory care, but they know they're going to apply for Medicaid and need Medicaid in the future, that's important to know because if you go into a community that does not accept it, you're going to have to relocate.
Great. So we're going to open up for some questions here in a few minutes, and I'm sure several of you have them. So I'll ask our educational partners, those of you that have the microphones, to be at the ready. Our partners will hold the microphone. We're going to try and capture you. So they're going to just stand there and put the microphone right in front of your face so we can hear the question, and then we will obviously repeat the question. Before we start with those questions, I'd like to just open it up to any closing comments that the two of you might have.
I think the one thing that I would like to close with is we now know that you can prevent Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Yes, there are risk factors that put you at higher risk, but we do know of ways. There was a study done in 2015. It was called the FINGER study. It's an acronym for a big long term for this study. But we found ways that if you initiate them in your lifestyle, it can help prevent Alzheimer's disease. The number one way is through exercise. Anything that is good for the heart is good for the brain. So we do know exercise, we now know diet, we have a diet that we call the MIND diet. We know socialization, just what you all were doing here. Cognitive engagement, learning, doing puzzles, talking with individuals, expanding your vocabulary. We do know knowing your numbers. If you're diabetic, keep those numbers in therapeutic level. Know your blood pressure, know your cholesterol. Do not smoke, limit your alcohol. We know all of these factors, so if you need more information on that, I'll be happy to provide it. But they did all come from a 2-year study in 2015, and it's our guiding protocol that we give our patients.
That's great. And we also have Jana Ricci with My Memory Clinic here. She's going to be in the back of the room with the educational partners and has some great handouts relative to some of those things that Maureen just discussed. Ignacio?
I mean, all I have to say is kudos to all of you for being here, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate for education, so just you being here, that's awesome. You know, it's a great topic with lots of things to think about. So, again, you're not alone. Folks are not alone through this process. There's a lot of resources out there, a lot of them in the back of the room too, so I applaud you for being here.
Awesome. All right, so I know we have some questions. We'll start in the back of the room there.
Hi. To what degree does low dose of antidepressant help a person that has the early onset, signs of Alzheimer's?
Okay, so the question is, to what degree does a low dose antidepressant affect someone with a diagnosis?
Yes, so that is where if we see a mood element with their dementia, such as anxiety or depression, we know that it goes hand in hand with memory loss a lot of times. That is what we do start them on, is a low dose antidepressant. We find them to be very effective, and the ones that we choose in the geriatric world are the ones that are the safest for people of the older population. So yes, it's very beneficial.
Okay, and that's for that specific type of dementia?
Yeah, well, a lot of times the mood component is part of a lot of the different types of dementia. So, but we do commonly prescribe that. We stay away from tranquilizers. Sometimes we do need them, but we stay away from like your Xanax, your Ativan, your lorazepam, and use them as emergencies only when there's a really bad episode of agitation.
Great, thank you. Another question over here?
Yeah.
Hold on just a second, we're going to bring a microphone to you, sir.
Yes, I'll lower my mask for a moment. Do you need a referral to have this assessment program, or can I call you up?
You can call me up. So if you are having a problem with your memory.
Oh, the question was,
Yes.
I forgot, do you need a referral to go get tested?
No, you do not. We have what we call the Healthy Brain Assessment. That is for someone that wants that baseline. Unfortunately, Medicare doesn't cover it. It is a private pay option. It is $250, but you do meet and you have an individual hour with a nurse practitioner or the physician, and we go over your entire risk profile, we do your cognitive test, we give you your results. However, if someone does have a memory problem and they want to have their loved one evaluated, that is covered by Medicare, and you would just call, make that appointment, and we would do a thorough assessment and see, and we would do the diagnosis to the whole workup at that point.
Okay. All right, do we have another question up front here? Nicole, we're gonna keep you busy, are we? Okay, Shirley.
You mentioned, thank you, you mentioned supplements.
Yes.
Maybe, specifically B12. Is
Yes.
that something the common person should be taking, some supplements to help their mental health?
Yes, that's
So the question
so the
is about supplements and what supplements should we be taking, specifically is B12 recommended?
Right, so we know through research there are 2 supplements that are very important for brain health, and that is vitamin B12 and vitamin D. The only way we know if you need it is if you ask your primary care doctor or you come for your evaluation if you have your blood level taken. Some people have plenty of vitamin B12, it comes from your diet, but some people do not. So if your level is less than 500, we recommend a supplement. Same with vitamin D. If your level is below 50, we recommend a supplement. There are many companies out there that have panels of supplements. We can't recommend all of these supplements because there's not scientific backing to support them. But vitamin B12 and vitamin D are the ones that we do have research to back.
Great, and you can get that vitamin test from your primary care physician or?
Exactly, you just have to ask your primary, usually they will do it, but you just have to say, in addition to my yearly blood work, could you add in a vitamin B12 and a vitamin D? Just be proactive and ask, and there you go.
Okay, we have to advocate for ourselves
We do.
sometimes. Got a question here in the front row.
Thank you. On the same point, vitamin B12 is part of a multivitamin, so does that provide enough, or should you have the multivitamin plus a direct vitamin?
Yeah, that's a great question too, so.
The question is, do you need, is what's in a multivitamin B12 enough? And vitamin D, I'm sure, is in a multivitamin also.
Right, so again, it depends on that baseline level. So in your multivitamin, it might just be plenty, but for others, not. And I'll use my husband as an example. He has a multivitamin, he takes a B12, he had his level drawn, and it's 1,500. And it's supposed to be 500, you know, for ultimate brain health. So basically, he had very expensive urine because you basically urinate out vitamin B12, so it's very golden. So, TMI, but anyway.
He's not here, he'll know
He's
your
not, yeah. So just to answer your question, get the level and then you'll be able to see if you need that supplement.
Awesome. Do we have one more question?
I wonder if you could repeat the name of the group that helps veterans, what program helps veterans?
Oh, the program that helps veterans. Ignacio?
So the VA, so the VA themselves will be the ones that
Just general VA called, you don't need a specific name of a specific program that the VA is?
it's a free service that the VA will offer, meaning if you want to apply for that aid and attendance, it's a free application. So you have to go directly through the VA, yes.
VA aid and attendance
Yes.
is the program.
Yeah.
And since that was a quickie, I think we have one more up front here.
Yes, this again is for Maureen. You mentioned vascular dementia can be caused by stroke. I have a friend who had a stroke and struggles with words, recalling certain things. You also mentioned like puzzles, exercise, socialization. Are those tools that my friend could utilize to help her brain function, or is there something else?
So if someone is struggling with a diagnosis, what are some tools to maybe help or socialization activities that you could do with that person?
So just like we provide prevention strategies. We also advocate for anyone with dementia to follow those as well, because they will increase what we call your cognitive reserve. So absolutely, so if anyone does have any type of dementia, such as your friend with vascular dementia, we give what's called a brain health prescription. And that would be for their exercise, their cognitive exercises such as their puzzles, their word games, math games, cognitive or social engagement, the diet. We give all of that. So it's the same thing we give for prevention as we do to keep the brain healthy throughout the process. So yes, they definitely help.
Awesome, awesome. Now, Maureen and Ignacio are going to stick around for a few minutes, so if you have a burning question that you'd like to raise with them, you can certainly do so after we're done. We also have our educational partners in the back of the room. If you want to go tell them what you love, they'll be ready to hear that. Did we try? Yes?
I have a question.
Okay, can you ask it?
Very brief.
Okay, very brief.
Is there a one source, reliable place where a person can check out nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and get a completely truthful answer on their licensing?
Okay, so is there a place where you can get 100% true information on licensing? And I think, Ignacio, we talked about that. You said, yeah, ask them, right?
Well, you can ask. For nursing homes, it's a little different. Nursing homes, you can actually go on Medicare.gov, and you can pull up the specific nursing home. You'll have star ratings, you'll have public information because they're regulated by the government to some degree and funded by the government, so it's a little different. Assisted living is privately paid, meaning they don't really necessarily take government funding, so it's a little different. They are regulated, and we can speak after this if you like. I can give you more information. I'd be more than glad to do that. But yes, there's a way you can look at some elements in assisted living that are public. Others you cannot. But I'll chat with you about that if you
And
want.
I would say also that one of our educational partners, the ADRC, is a great place to go to start because they control a data bank of resources. And Robin is in the back of the room. She can direct you to whomever that you might need to go to. So that will be a good resource for you as well. And ADRC is a nonprofit, and we're happy to support them. And we are actually going to be, so a little housekeeping at the end of this. I will tell you that it's our June seminar that we are going to have someone from the ADRC here and someone from Conquest here to talk about the research aspects of dementia and what's coming down the pike, what the brain bank is all about, what the studies are saying, what the science is, what is happening. So we've got a great foundation here today, and in June, third Wednesday in June, you'll want to be here because that's going to be a great seminar as well. Now, did we try and sell you anything at this seminar? Nope. Okay, good. The question that we have for you is, what are you going to do with the information that you received today? So I encourage you to set an intention for what you're going to do with the plethora of notes that I'm sure that you took. A couple of other announcements that I would like to share. Paul and I are going to be speaking at Westminster next week. If you're interested in coming to that, please see us after or see Nicole and we can tell you more about that. So we're excited to be over there. And then next month, the third Wednesday of March, which is the Ides of March. I just like to say the Ides of March. Is going to be our seminar on the truth about how to avoid scams and fraud. Our very own Mark Wright from Innovative Title Services is going to be here, and we have a banker that's going to be here as well. So I think you're going to want to be here. Mark comes to our office quite regularly and shares lots of scary information, but also ways, knowledge is power, as Maureen said, and if we know how to beat those scammers, we can certainly do that. We thank you for being here. I thank you especially for the new faces that came out this week and those of you that brought a guest. We always like to close with a quote, and so here we go. Those with dementia are still people, and they still have stories, and they still have character, and they're all individuals, and they are all unique. And they just need to be interacted with on a human level. So thank you for being with us here today to learn more about dementia. We look forward to seeing you at next month's seminar.